Hi, everybody. My name is Kelli, and I'm from the Fallon Food Hub here in Fallon, Nevada. And we're here today at the historic Douglas House in downtown Fallon, which is a historic place, but fortunately, it has a kitchen in it that might look very much like your kitchen at home. And the reason that we're here today is because I'm wanting to talk to you about this book, Good and Cheap, which is a cookbook that was written by a woman named Leanne Brown. And this cookbook is filled with lots of easy recipes that you and your brothers and sisters and your parents can prepare in your house. So before we get started, today we're going to make this recipe, peanut butter and jelly granola bars. And I'm going to walk you through how to do it. And at the end, we're going to taste them. But before we get started, I want to just tell you a couple of really interesting and important points that you should do anytime you're going to make some food. The first thing is that I have an apron here. And aprons are important because I like to not get my clothes dirty. So if you're doing this at home, maybe you have an apron, go ahead and go get one. And if not, think about putting on a shirt or a button down that's something that you don't mind if you get some oatmeal or some peanut butter on it. All right. The second most important thing before you get started cooking is that you want to make sure that you've washed your hands. Anytime you handle food, it's really important to make sure that your hands are really clean, and so you don't get any of the dirt from playing outside into your food. So, to wash your hands, you're going to want to turn on hot water. And you get your hands wet. Put some soap on them. And you want to lather your hands up for 20 seconds. So, I like to sing the happy birthday song, but also the ABCs work well too. And because I'm a little bit shy, I'm not going to sing it out loud for you. I think you'll all appreciate that. Once you've got a good lather, you just want to rinse those off. All right, now that I've got my apron and my hands are clean, let's get started talking about the ingredients. Okay, so first thing you want to do is gather all of the tools and the ingredients that you need to be able to prepare your recipe. So first off, we've got our cookbook, Good and Cheap, and this recipe can be found on page 6. So I'm going to open that up and we're going to put it right here so it's a handy reference that I can look down anytime I have a question. The other things that we're going to need to make this recipe, we need a small pot. We need some sort of container to put the granola bars in once you've finished making the batter. This can be an 8x10 pan. It can be a round pan. You could even, if you wanted to, shape them into little balls and make them into cookies, in which case you would need a sheet pan. But regardless, you want something to put the batter in that's oven friendly and can be put into the oven at 350 degrees. I also have a spoon to help me measure out peanut butter and jelly and all the other ingredients. You're going to need 2 measuring cups for this. I have a 1 cup measuring cup and I have a 1/4 cup measuring cup. Now these are the measuring utensils that we're going to use for all of our dry ingredients. So the peanut butter and the jelly, even though they don't feel dry, count as dry ingredients. So we're going to use these for the oats, the peanut butter, and the jelly. The other thing that I have, I just put some water in it, is a liquid measuring cup. Anytime you're measuring water or milk or chicken stock, anything like that, you want to use a graduated, that means it has these little lines on it, measuring cup. And in this recipe, we need 1/4 cup of water, so I've already measured that out. We need a large bowl to mix all of our ingredients in. And I always prefer to use a spatula because this is a really good tool for being able to scrape the sides of the bowl. And you can tell we're in downtown Fallon because that's the fire signal, which all of us are very, very familiar with. All right, now the ingredients that we're going to need for this recipe include some spray for the pan. If you don't have spray, you can also use butter to grease your pan. But greasing the pan is really important. So make sure you either have some spray or some butter. We also have peanut butter. I like to use a creamy peanut butter in this recipe. We have some jam. You can use jam or jelly, and any flavor is fine. So you can use strawberry or blueberry or even boysenberry. Today we're going to be using Concord grape. And then we have our oats. If you only have instant oats or 1-minute oats, those work. But I prefer the texture of using a traditional old-fashioned oats. And if you've picked your kit up from the Churchill County Library, you'll have all of these ingredients and a copy of the cookbook already. So when you gather all of your stuff together, your pots and pans and bowls and utensils and measuring cups, and also your ingredients, there's a fancy word that we use in restaurants to call this. It's called your mise en place. And that's a French term, and basically it just means that you have everything ready and in its place. That way, while you're in the middle of making your recipe, you don't have to stop and go rushing to the refrigerator or to your pantry or to the store in order to get an ingredient that you need. All right, well, we have everything ready, and so let's get cooking. Great. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is turn your oven on to preheat it to 350 degrees. Let's see. That's going to allow your oven to heat up while we're doing all of our stirring and mixing. And so when we're ready to put our granola bars into the oven is hot and ready to go. Second, we're going to take our pan spray or our butter, and we're going to grease up the pan that we're putting our granola bars in. And then you can just set that aside. We're not going to need it for a little bit. Okay, so next, we're going to measure out our oats. This recipe calls for 3 cups of oats. 1, 2. Oh, you know what? It's okay. With a recipe like this, the measurements are a good guide, but if you get a little extra oats in your bowl, it's not the end of the world. 3. So now that we have the oats in the bowl, we're going to set those aside, and we're going to work on our peanut butter mix. So you're going to want to get your pot, and we're going to combine together a 1/4 cup of water, and then we're going to measure out a 1/2 cup of peanut butter. I'm just going to use my 1 cup and fill it up about halfway. You can use a 1/2 cup measuring cup at your house if you would like. All right, you can see that's just about half full. This is another good reason why we've washed our fingers, in case you get the inclination to stick your fingers into the peanut butter. You know that they've been clean. Another thing about hand washing, anytime you touch your face or your hair after you wash your hands, you need to stop and wash your hands again. All right, so we've put our peanut butter and our water in there. And then the next step is we're going to measure out a 1/2 cup, or I'm sorry, a 1/4 cup of jelly. Okay, so we're going to measure out a 1/4 cup of the jelly or jam. Now, it's important that you notice that the recipe actually calls for a 1/2 cup of jelly, but half of what you need goes into your pot, and then we're going to save the other 1/4 cup of jelly for the very end. All right. So there we go. We've got our 1/4 cup of jelly, and we're going to mix that in here too. Perfect. All right. Now we've got our mix of peanut butter and jelly and water, and right now it looks kind of separated and a little bit a little bit strange. But the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to heat this up on the stove until it's all combined together and nice and smooth. If you haven't used a stove before, make sure you ask one of the adults in your house about how to use it. It's really important that you are aware that you can hurt yourself on a stove because as we heat up our burner, it gets hot. And so you want to make sure that you have gotten a basic lesson on how to use one and maybe have an adult present while you're working on this. All right, to the stove we go. All right, so here we are at the stove. This stove is a gas stove. But if you have an electric stove in your house, it works just the same way. We're going to turn it on, and then once we've turned it on, you'll notice that we can see the flames. Now with an electric stove, there's a coil, and the coil heats up. We don't need to turn up our stove too high here. We basically just want to heat up your peanut butter and water and jelly and stir it until it gets to be nice and smooth. Smooth and warm. You can see it's starting to come together, but it's still kind of gloopy. All right, so you can see now that our peanut butter and jelly and water has all come together into a nice, fairly even, consistent gloop. All right, so the next step is we're going to add this gloop into our oats. So back to the oats we go. All right. So here we are, and we've got our gloopy peanut butter mix, and we're going to just pour it right on top of the oats that we have in our big mixing bowl. These pots and pans can get a little bit heavy, and it's important to remember that it's just been on the stove, and so it's hot. So if you need to ask for some help with this part, please feel free. You can have somebody hold the pot while you scrape it out. That's the way I like to do it because the scraping is the more fun part. All right, and we want to use our spatula and just get as much of the peanut butter mix out of here as we possibly can. That's why the spatula is so perfect, because it's got that rubber side and you can really scrape. All right. And now you can see we've got the peanut butter and the oats in the bowl. And the next step is just to mix them together until all the oats are coated in the peanut butter. Now, while we're mixing this up, I want to tell you that this recipe is really flexible and friendly. We're just making the very basic version today with peanut butter and jelly and oats, but you can add all sorts of different things to here. Like, if your favorite cereal is Rice Krispies, you can actually do a mix of the oats and Rice Krispies, in which case, and you can see this right in the recipe book, it'll tell you to use 2 cups of oats and 1 cup of Rice Krispies. Also, I told you how you can use all different kinds of jam or jelly in here. You can also add in extra ingredients. So if you like nuts, you can put nuts in here. You can put pecans, or that's a nut. Shredded coconut is something you can put in here. You can add in chopped up dried fruit like cherries or cranberries or even raisins. You can also put in chocolate chips. Or you could use honey instead of the jelly if you prefer the flavor of honey. All right, and you would just add those in right now where you're combining all of your ingredients together before you put them in the pan. All right, you can see that my mix has come together and all the oats are coated really well with the peanut butter mix. So now we're going to take and scrape this batter into our greased pan. See if I can show you a little bit better there. All right. And then once you have it in the pan, you want to press it down so it's in a pretty even layer on the bottom of the pan. Okay, and depending on the size pan that you're using, your granola bars are going to end up either thicker or thinner, and that's okay. All right, we've got a pretty nice even layer there. And remember that jelly that we talked about, the 1/4 cup of jelly that we didn't put into the saucepan? Now is the time for it to shine. So we're going to take and measure out another 1/4 cup of jelly. And then we're going to smear that on just right over the top of our granola bars. Now, a good thing to do while you're making food is to clean up as you go. That way, at the end, you don't have a really, really dirty kitchen and nobody gets mad at you. So I'm going to take my dirty peanut butter cup and jelly cup, and I'm just going to put them right in here, along with all of my utensils. And then that's it. Those are all the dirty dishes. So those can go to the sink and get cleaned up and put away. All right. And now that we've smeared the jelly all over the top of the granola bars, it's time to put it into the oven. Now remember, your oven's been preheating, so it should be hot and ready to go. And you can tell because usually your oven will beep at you or the light will go out where it says that it's preheating. It's important to remember that the oven's hot, which means right now as we're putting this into the oven, we want to be really careful and safe not to touch any of the shelves or anything inside the oven. Also, when it's time to pull this out of the oven, you need to use a pot holder or some way of protecting your hand from pulling it out because the pan is going to be hot. Also, you can ask for help with that if you'd like. Okay, so there's our peanut butter and jelly granola bars, and we're just going to stick those right into the oven. And they're going to be in the oven baking for 25 minutes. An important thing to remember when you're baking something in the oven is to set a timer. That way, if you go and play a game or read a book, you don't lose track of time and forget about your granola bars in the oven because that would be a disaster. So we'll come back in 25 minutes and our granola bars will be ready to cut and eat. Okay, so our granola bars have baked for 25 minutes. The timer just went off, and now we're going to take them out of the oven. Okay, look at that. You can see they've gotten kind of brown and crispy around the edges, and the jelly looks nice and shiny. So you're going to want to let this cool until it's comfortable to touch. So that could be maybe 15, 20 minutes. I know you're going to feel like eating them right away, but you definitely don't want to burn your mouth. So make sure you let them sit. And we're going to come back in just another moment and we'll cut these up and try them. All right, the last thing that we have to do before we get to eat our granola bars is to cut them. One pan like this can make 12, maybe 16 granola bars. You can cut them really into any size that you want. If you're using a square pan, you can cut them into strips. Since this is a round pan, I'm going to cut them into wedges. All right. And there you go, a peanut butter and jelly granola bar. They're delicious. Thanks to a partnership between the Fallon Food Hub and the Churchill County Library, you can come get a kit with all of the ingredients that you need to make this delicious peanut butter and jelly granola bar recipe. It comes with a book, your oats, some peanut butter, and some jelly. We would like to say an extra special thanks to Mayor Ken Tedford and the City of Fallon for giving us the opportunity to use the historic Douglas House. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy cooking your peanut butter and jelly granola bars.